Okay. Whoa, 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 whoa. Bum, ba-da-dum, ba-da-dum, bum, bum, ba-da-dum, ba-da-da-dum. Dee, da, na, sa, da, lay, lay, da, lay, 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 lay. Lay, 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 da, da. Na, 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 na. Ay, da, 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 da. Good morning, everybody. As we start the Shitas of the day,
Good morning.
good morning, and we are continuing in the portion of Kisisa, and we are holding the sixth reading of the portion, which is on chapter 34, verse number 10. Vayemer, this is still the dialogue between Moshe Rabbeinu and God. Vayemer, hine anechi kaidis im kaidis brig. Please, behold, I will form a covenant. Nega kol amcha esen aflois in the presence of all your people. I will show distinction. Asher le'nivra b'chol haaretz u'b'chol hagoyim. It has not been created upon all the earth and amongst all the nations. And all the people of of in whose midst you are in shall see Esmaise Hashem Kineiruhu, the work of the Lord, how awe-inspiring it is. Asher ani oise imach, which I will perform with you. Rashi says, "Kodesh bris al zeis." I'm making a covenant concerning this. That what loshem neflinu shetil mivdolim, expression of an neflinu, which means you'll be distinguished, meaning that you shall be separate from all the pagan nation. That the Shechina shall not rest upon them, but upon you. Verse 11. Therefore, you have to be careful. If you want to be in a flinu, then you have to be very concerned what I command you today. I'm going to drive out from before you the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Hittites, and the Perizzites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites. Rashi says, there are six nations enumerated here. Not usually what we say seven, because the Gershites, the seventh nation, got up and immigrated before them. They ran away before the Jewish people came to the land of Israel. Verse 12. Be very careful. When you make a covenant with the inhabitants of the land, which you're coming to, be a snare in your midst. Do not make any peace with anybody. Verse 13, you shall demolish their altars, and shatter their monuments, and cut down their cedar trees. Rashi says, why you have against the trees? These wasn't a shade of, this was a certain tree that in those days they used to worship this certain tree, called an Asherah. Verse number 14. I'm not sure today we know what tree that was, or if anybody's worships this kind of a tree. Verse number 14. You should not bow down before another god. Hashem kana shmoim, because God's name his name is jealous. El kana, he's a jealous God. What does that mean? So Rashi says he is zealous to mete out retribution, and he's not indulgent. That is the meaning of the expression of jealousy when used in a connection with God. It means that he's steadfast in his superiority over other deities and exact retribution about those who forsake him. So God is extremely uncomfortable with idol worship. It's one of the three cardinal sins, so to say, where the person has to give his life is idol worship. Verse numbers 15. May you, if you're going to make a covenant with the people of that land, and you'll start to astray after their gods. We're going to start sacrificing to the gods. And they'll call to you, you'll eat from their slaughterings. Rash says you may think that there's no punishment for eating it. But when you eat it, consider it for you as if you endorsed its worship. For through the eating of a sacrifice, you'll come to take from their daughters and from their sons. And then the next thing is you're going to take their daughters for your sons. Then their daughters will go astray after their gods. And they'll lead your sons astray after their gods. So therefore be very careful. You shall not make yourself a molten image for yourself. Verse 18. The festival of Pesach you shall keep. Shivas Yomim Teichel Matzah, for 7 days you shall eat matzahs. Which I command you. L'moed Chodesh Aviv, to the appointed time of the month of spring. Because in the month of spring you went out of Mitzrayim, and therefore we always have to have Pesach in the spring. A month of early ripening, when the grain first ripens, is the month of spring. Verse 19. All that opens the womb is mine. The firstborn is mine, the one that first opens the womb. And all your livestock that bears a male by the merge of an ox of a lamb is also mine, the firstborn. So first what Rashi is called Petalechem is talking about a human among humans. And then the Torah tells us also the firstborn of an animal. All your livestock that bears firstborn male by the emergence of an ox or a lamb from the womb, meaning that the male will open its womb, is the firstborn of a male. So too by humans. The firstborn girl doesn't have the law of a firstborn per se, with this law of being paid, redeeming a firstborn girl. You only redeem a firstborn boy. So now it says peter. What means the word peter? We translate emergence. Peter, the word means opening. Similar to the beginning of the strife, like letting out peter, water opening. That should bring the proof from Mishlei that it means opening. Verse 20. If you have a firstborn donkey, if the Beseh, you shall redeem it with a lamb, because you can't bring a donkey to the Beis Hamikdash. So you have to be paid, you have to redeem it with a lamb. If you do not redeem your donkey, barafta, you have to kill it. All your firstborn of your sons, you shall redeem. You should not appear before me empty-handed. Nachi says this is an exclusive law to begin with. And a donkey needs to be redeemed. Only a donkey needs to be redeemed. But not the firstborn or other unclean animals. So only a donkey, not a horse. Only a donkey. Tifta b'seh. So Rashi says you give the lamb to the kohen, and it becomes an ordinary unconsecrated property of the kohen. And the firstborn donkey may be put to work by the owner. It belongs to the owner. So that's the law of redeeming a donkey. Only a donkey is redeemed in Torah law. And after he's decapitated with a cleaver, caused the kohen to lose his money by electing it to give him the redemption lamb. Therefore, he must lose his own money by decapitating his donkey. He's not allowed to have the donkey. Either he gives the kohen the sheep, or he has to get rid of the donkey. This is a Torah law, Gezeres HaKosov, as it's brought down. That the Torah wanted the donkey should be redeemed. I do not know why specifically a donkey. Then the Torah goes back to the law of a human. How do you redeem a child? The redemption of is established by 5 slime, as it says later on in the book of Numbers. And the redemption by form the age of 1 month, and by the valuation of 5 shkalim. And do not appear me empty-handed. According to the simple meaning of the verse, this is a separate matter from the rest of the verse. And it's unrelated to the firstborn, because there's no obligation to appear in the temple in the command dealing with the firstborn. What do you mean? I'm not going to the temple. I go to the Kohen, I give him his 5 coins, and I'm finished. So what does it mean? You should not see me empty. It has to do about something else. This comes to teach us. Instead, it's another warning, meaning when you ascend to the temple on the festival, you shall not appear before me empty-handed. But it's incumbent upon to bring a burnt offering. You have to bring a carbon. When you come to the temple, you have to bring a called oilas ria. It's a oila that I'm coming to the temple. So that's what the pasuk is. That's what the Gemara says. According to the way of an interpretation by a brisa, this is a superfluous verse. What's already stated that you have to do that. So why does it come to tell us these concepts? So Gemara says it comes to teach us even a total different thing. Here you see Pshat, Remesh, Dur, Soid, how the Torah is expanded upon and expanded upon and expanded upon. So this pasuk comes to tell us another whole learning, that when you come to a Hebrew slave, when he's freed, that is 5 slime for each kind of sheep and grain and wine, as much as the redemption of the firstborn. When you come to redeem a slave, you also have to redeem him with 5 slime. And that's the whole Gezeda Shava what the Gemara learns in Kedushin on page 17. Verse 21. 6 days a week you shall work. On the 7th day you shall rest. In plowing and harvest you shall rest. So Rashi says, in the plowing and the harvest you shall rest. What does that mean? If this refers to the Shabbos, why are plowing and harvest mentioned in particular and not other kinds of work? So therefore, what is the meaning of this verse? We're talking about the regular Shabbos. What is the connection with specifically plowing and harvesting? Some of our rabbis say that this verse prohibits plowing before the 7th year. It's not even talking about Shabbos. It's talking about the 7th year and the 6th year, which ends in the 7th year. Plowing that benefit the crop that grow in the 7th year is not allowed. And the harvest of the 7th year that grows after the 7th year, meaning crop that have at least 1/3 of its growth during the 7th year, must be treated with the sanctity of the 7th year. This is to teach you that you must add from the unholy the year preceding the 7th year to the holy of the 7th year. Accordingly, this is the meaning. 6 days you may work. On the 7th day you shall rest. And concerning the work of the 6 days, which I have permitted you, there is a year in which plowing and harvesting are prohibited. The plowing and the harvest of the 7th year need not to be stated, because it is already says, your field shall not sow. So we're talking about before the 7th year. The Chodesh of Akasha Tishbais in the 6th year already. You have to already start to keep the 7th year Sabbath, the sabbatical of the 7th year. That's again how we learn from the Torah. We have to be able to expound on the verses of Torah. Consequently, we deduce that this verse means the plowing before the 7th year. and the harvest after the seventh year. Others of the rabbis say the verse speaks only about the weekly Shabbos, and the plowing and the harvest mentioned in its context are to inform you that just as the prohibition of plowing is optional plowing, so is harvest referred to as optional harvesting. The harvest of the omer, however, is excluded from this prohibition because it's a mandatory, and consequently it supersedes the Shabbos. So Torah comes and tells us there are certain times that, let's say, the cutting of the omer will fall out on Shabbos, which is an obligation to bring the omer to the Beis Hamikdash, then you would even do it on Shabbos. So there are certain things, the general, you're not allowed to have any harvesting on Shabbos, but there will come a time, maybe, here comes the Midshem, in the time of Beis Hamikdash, where they needed to do the Ktsira of the Omer on the first day of Pesach, and if it fell on Shabbos, you might say you shouldn't do it. Comes the Torah and tells us no, only regular cutting is prohibited. But since the Omer needs to be brought after the first day of Pesach, it needs to be done even on Shabbos, if that would ever happen. Verse 22. And you shall make yourself a festival of weeks. The first weed of the wheat harvest. The Chag HaOfis to Kufas Hashana, and the festival and gathering at the turn of the year. Rashi says, the first of the wheat harvest, that is the celebration of Shavuos, which is called the holiday of weeks. And this is the festival you should bring the two breads made of wheat. Bikurei, so this is the first meal offering brought to the temple for the new wheat crop, because the meal offering of the Omer on Passover is brought from barley, but the meal offering that's brought on Shavuot is brought from wheat. So that's what they mentioned before, the cutting of the barley that was brought on Pesach. Chag HaOsif is also, Shavuos is called, the holiday, now it's a holiday of Sukkot, Chag HaOsif, which occurs at the time when they're gathering your grain from the field into the house. This gathering, Asifa, term donates, bring it into the house. You shall take it into your house. When does that happen? Kufas Hashana, which is the return of the year, the beginning of the year, the upcoming year, the month of Tishrei, which is the first month of the year, counting your creation. So here is the Chag HaOsif, the holiday of Sukkot. Kufas Hashana is the Kufa is denoting going around, encompassing, going in a circle. They have the circle, the Pesach, Shavuos, Sukkot. Pesach, spring. Shavuot is a festival that's connected to the harvest, and the gathering is the holiday of Sukkot. These are the three holidays, and that's why the verse 23, Shalosh Pam Bashana, 3 times during the year, Yera Kol Schurcha Spnei Hashaden Hashem, every male needs to come to the Beis Hamikdash. Okay, so the Lord of the God. So Rashi said, all males among you. This is repeated elsewhere as we are as many commandments in the Torah which are stated and repeated. Many of them 3 or 4 times, in order to cause liability and mete out punishment according to the number of negative commandments that contain the number of positive commandments they contain. So you can see that many times the Torah tells us this law about going to the Beis Hamikdash in those 3 holidays to emphasize what kind of great merit you get if you go to the Beis Hamikdash, and the opposite if you don't. Verse 24. I will drive out the nations from before you. I'll widen your borders. No one will covet your land. When you go up to see the Lord, shalish pamim bashana 3 times a year. Rashi says, I will widen your borders, and this way you'll be far from the temple. And so you can't constantly appear before me. Therefore, I'm setting these 3 holidays for you to come up to the Beit Hamikdash. So therefore, if you lived in the Golan, or you lived across the Jordan, you couldn't come to the Beit Hamikdash on a constant basis. So you were obligated to come on these 3 festivals. Verse 25. You shall not slaughter or sprinkle the blood of my sacrifice with leaven. And the offering of Passover feast shall not be remain overnight until the morning. Rashi says, this comes to teach us. You shall not slaughter the Passover sacrifice as long as leaven still exists. This is a specific warning to slaughter, or to one who sprinkled the blood, or to one who is a member of the group bringing the sacrifice. He has to make sure not to have chametz. And that's why, again, we learned this before already. That's why Pesach starts earlier than a regular holiday. Pesach starts already in the middle of the day of the 14th of the month. Usually a holiday starts at night. Pesach starts already in the daytime. So that's why even today, these days, we are not allowed we get rid of the chametz. We stop eating chametz by like 10 o'clock. And we're not allowed you have to get rid of, you have to be out of any chametz by 11 o'clock. So that's it. Pesach starts, and it has to be burnt by the 12th hour. So that's it. Pesach starts in the middle of the day. So even though, in general, Pesach starts, every holiday starts at night, Passover starts in the middle of the day, because that's when they start to bring the korban Pesach. And once you start bringing the korban Pesach, you're not allowed to have chametz in your possession. Well, you're not allowed to leave it over. You're not allowed to leave it remaining overnight on the top of the altar. Has no effect, does not disqualify the sacrifice. And the prohibition of staying overnight is only completely at the break of dawn. Zevach para Pesach. This refers to the sacrificial parts. From here you learn to apply this rule to all instances of burning fats or limbs of a sacrifice, namely they may not be performed after the break of dawn. The sacrificial parts stay off the altar all night until the break of dawn. This teaches us the laws of sacrificial offerings. We're going to learn a lot about it in the book of Leviticus, and what sacrifices, the time value, so to say, how long they need to. In general, the Beit HaMikdash was open from sunset to sunrise to sunset, and all the sacrifice really need to be done by sunset. But there were a lot of sacrifices. That means they were shechted already, slaughtered already, but the animals were not brought on the altar. The parts were not brought on the altar. They were allowed to be brought the whole night. But they had to make sure that all the sacrifices were brought a whole night, and not that it was left over in the morning. There were still sacrificial parts that were not brought up. So the Kohanim sometimes were very, very busy the whole night, especially when it came to the Passover holiday, when hundreds and thousands, millions of people came to the Beis Hamikdash for the holiday, and they brought sacrificial offerings. There were hundreds of thousands of sacrifices. So the Beis Hamikdash closed by sunset, but then the Kohanim were busy bringing sacrificial offerings on top and taking all the animals that were slaughtered before sunset, and they were brought up on the Mizbeach the entire night. But they had to be finished by sunrise. Every animal needed to be on the Mizbeach by sunrise. Verse 26. The choice is going back to the holiday of Shavuot. The choice of the first soil you shall bring to the house of the Lord your God. You're not allowed to cook a kid in its mother's milk. So now she says this refers to the fruits of the 7 species delineated to the praise of the Lord of praise of the land of wheat, barley, vine, figs, pomegranates, a land that produces oil of olives and honey. And that's the honey of dates. So those are the 7 fruits that Israel was blessed with, and that's the first fruits that are obligated to bring on the holiday of Shavuot. This is a warning against cooking meat and milk together. This commandment is written in the Torah 3 times. That you're not allowed to cook milk and meat together. One for eating, it's a prohibition against eating. One for deriving any benefits from it's something that was cooked of milk and meat together. You cannot have any benefit from it. And one for a prohibition of cooking. So it's prohibited to cook. It's prohibited to have any benefit from it. It's prohibited, self-understood, to eat. So those are three prohibitions of eating of the concept of milk and meat together. So God forbid somebody by mistakes mix and cooks milk and meat together, he can't give it away. He has to simply throw it in the garbage, destroy it. Yedi, any young offspring is meant, even a calf or a lamb. So the Torah had specifically in many places, the Izim, young goat, is meant. So we know that this does not mean only a gedi, a lamb. When the Torah goes back between different kinds of animals, calls them all the same, and it jumps between different animals. It doesn't only mean a goat; it can mean a cow. And here's a prohibition of mixing milk and meat of an animal, but not really of a chicken. A chicken does not go in this category really, and therefore that we don't mix milk and a chicken together is only a rabbinical obligation. As Rashi says, why the Torah say in the milk of its mother? You're not allowed to put in any milk, whether it's mother or not. So this excludes fowl. So therefore, the Torah excludes really. In the Torah, mixing milk and a chicken together is not a prohibition. Only mixing milk and meat together for an animal is prohibited in the Torah, which has no milk. So really, a chicken has no milk, which is not prohibited by the Torah, but by the decree of the sages. So that's why it says b'chalev imo, in the milk of its mother, because the Torah only wants to prohibit milk and meat of an animal, not of a bird, of a chicken. That ends the chumash of the day. I must apologize that I learned yesterday's chitas. I learned today's chitas yesterday. We're mixed up a little bit, and we're just going to have to learn it again, because this is the chitas of the day. So I apologize. And I hope that, again, sometimes I'm running from the shul in to give the class, so sometimes I make a mistake. I hope it doesn't happen too many times. But if anybody sees that I'm making a mistake, and that's why I try to see you, look over here, it's Friday, 21st of Adar. If in the future I'm making a mistake, please inform me that I'm making a mistake, and I'll go back to the chitas of the day. I don't want to learn not the chitas of the day. So we learned this yesterday already. I apologize. And but this is the chitas today, so we'll learn it again today. Everything is divine providence. We're going to learn it again today. This is chapter 36 of Tanya. Well, no state of our rabbis declared a blessed memory, Shetachlis b'Yisraelim, that purpose in which this world was created. Is because God had a desire to have an abode in this lower realm. God had a desire to have an abode in this lower realm. It's a very interesting thing. And let's read the middle, so we'll have something extra today. He desired that the essence of his Ein Sof be revealed as it is. That's what the Alter Rebbe in this chapter wants to emphasize. That the upper worlds does not have this, only the lower worlds has this, and that is that he wanted to reveal himself in the way he is. Amid the lower creation, our sages use the word abode or dwelling place to describe such a revelation. Just as a man's home serves as an abode for his essence, person has to feel comfortable in his house to be who he is. Maybe when he goes outside, he acts some way different. When he comes home, he has to feel like he or she feels comfortable in it. So too the world is intended to be an abode for God's essence. So there is an important thing. That's why Dira B'Tachtonim. Alter Rebbe now goes to explain the phrase the lower realms mentioned above. He shows that this refers specifically to our spiritual world, our physical world. And an explanation in brief. The term higher and lower realms do not denote degree of respective importance in the sight of God or the closest to him. There's no concept of higher and lower by God. Because in God's eyes, all worlds, from the highest to the lowest, are equally insignificant, as we mentioned many times in Tanya. Ain't Olam Vadi, God, everything is nothing. All are equally remote from him. On the other hand, he fills the lowest world just as he fills the highest. Thus, the term higher and lower must be understood as a standard of comparison within the numerous worlds. They indicate what degree godliness is revealed in each individual world. So in a higher world, it's revealed higher. In a lower world, it's revealed lower. The more revelation, the higher the world. The more obscurity and concealment, the lower. From this standpoint, our physical world is the very lowest. For here, godliness is most veiled and concealed. But nevertheless, God comes into this world. Alter Rebbe explains to me, but surely by God, there's no concept of higher and lower. It's not valid because no higher and lower by God. Because he pervades all worlds equally. So what is the meaning of higher and lower? With them explain the matter, however, is that God designed an abode in the realm considered lower within the ranks of the worlds as follows. For the world, any world was created, there was only he alone, one unique filling all the space in which he created the world. Anything that could have been conceived of as a space or a possibility for creation was filled with Ein Sof, with infinity. And so too now, Lefanav Yisbarech, before him everything is one. So by God, nothing has changed in creation. Before creation, after creation, by God, everything is the exact same way as before. So what happened? The change happened if the creation applies only to the recipient of the vivifying force and his life force. Before creation, there was none to receive the divine life force and life. Creation brought into being these recipients, and there's many recipients. Even in spirituality, you have the world of emanation, the world of creation, the world of formation. These are all recipients. As a human being is a recipient. How are they recipients? They're only recipients through garments, through contractions, which veils and conceals the light. So every recipient needs to be capable to be a recipient. To be a recipient, you need to be able to receive that light. Every person is different. Like you have a teacher has a classroom in front of him. He has a bunch of students. You cannot give everybody the same. Every recipient is different. Every child is different. Yosef, because if God would, if the teacher would reveal himself in an open way, nobody will receive. That's why this. So surely you understand that concept by God. Yosef, that no man can see me and live. Because if God reveal himself, no, nothing can live. So the God has to conceal himself so that the recipient can live. As the sages taught, that even the angels that are called in the Torah, they're called chayos. You say it in your davening in the morning before Shema. And the Efanim and the Wa and the Chayas, the living angels, Chayas of the earth. So they're also called Chayas, living. They also cannot see the essence of God. So even the angels are a spiritual thing. Still, no, they're a recipient. They might be spiritual, they're still a creation by God. And therefore, the difference between an angel and a human being is an angel is a greater recipient, and therefore he lost his physical form, so he has a spiritual form. But a human being is more physical, he's more dense, and he's further away from godliness. That's why he can have a physical form. So we're a lesser recipient than the angel who is a greater recipient. So that's the meaning of above and below. There's no such thing as above and below. It's all the concept of revelation and receiving, giving and receiving, the relationship between the giver and the receiver. If you're like if you take like a student in elementary and a student in high school and a student in college, it's all about the giver and the receiver. There's lesser in the elementary because the receivers are lesser, and therefore the teachers give them less. As they grow in receiving, they grow in giving. Same thing is the concept in the spiritual world. And this is the concept, say the stalshus. This is the concept of the chain-like graded downward succession of the world. Not one is high and one is lower. One is more receptive and one is less receptive. And therefore the giver gives more to the one who's more receptive than it gives to a receiver who's less receptive. So the receiver who's less receptive has to come down lower and lower. The teacher has to be much more, the teacher has to know how to condense his light, condense his wisdom to come to the level of the student. So to God had to condense the light from level to level to put more. The light is the same. The knowledge is the same. The light is the same. It's just the receiver receives it in another container. He's brought up to the many garments and concealed light, and the light force emanating from him. The more concealment, the lower the descent. And that is ultimately, imagine all the upper worlds that need to come down into this low world until ultimately this light came down. It was condensed and condensed and condensed and condensed, the same light, and ultimately came about a physical gross world. And this lowest world that there's no other lower than it. That's why this world is so concealed from the light of God. It's darkness upon darkness. How do you see how dark it is? How do we prove that this world is so dark? It's very simple. The Alter Rebbe says, look at this world, a world that is filled with coverings, and the other side, this is the only world that can go against God. A human being can become so gross. He can become even more gross than an animal, the Gemara says. He can become so gross and so dark that he can say, I am, and there's nothing else besides me. When that's so untrue. That's so untrue. But a person can ultimately say that. because he's so far away from godliness. And that's all it's about. It's all about his own farness from God that doesn't let the light reveal itself into it. But really, if you think about it, the Alter Rebbe said, the purpose of Seder Shtaus of all the worlds and their descent from level to level is not for the upper worlds. Is not for the upper worlds. The whole reason why God descended from level to level and ultimately came down into this world is all for this world. The Eibishter wanted to come in a concealed way so that a human being in this world would be able to do something with it. So the whole descent from level to level, God made contractions upon contractions, is not for the upper worlds, is all for this world. I want to read this English, this interpretation. Since there is but one order of a shtaushlus, the question arises: does ultimately purpose lie in the higher worlds, where God is revealed in a greater degree, while the lower worlds serve only to emphasize the revelation found in the higher than them? Is that the whole purpose? To show that there's a greater world up there? Or on the contrary, does its purpose lie in the lower realm? But in order to create them, the order of Ishtalshus is necessary, entailing the creation of the higher realms. So that's the question. What is important? Is it important that this world is for the upper worlds, and our whole purpose of this world is to show there's a godly world, Gan Eden? Or it's the other way? The whole purpose of the upper worlds is to reveal God in this world. So Alter Rebbe explains, obviously concealment of godliness is not an end in itself. Thus, if we assume the second position, it follows that the lower realms were created so that the darkness pervading them be transformed into light. And that's what the Alter Rebbe wanted to emphasize, that everything was created, that this world that is so dark, so far, should be able to be revealed. Statement that God desired an abode in the lower realms shows the latter position to be the true one. And the abode is built by the revelation of his presence in the lowest of worlds, to the degree surpassing even that of the light of the highest worlds. This is in brief, is the subject of the following paragraph in the text. So what to give you? The purpose of this descent of the worlds and their descent from level to is not for the sake of the higher worlds. That's the meaning. The Eibishter wanted a dwelling. God wanted a dwelling place in this world. Because by them it can constitute a descent of light of his countenance. Rather, the purpose of Ishtalshlus, this descent, is the lowest world. Because this is what came into the mind of God, his will. That'll be a pleasurable to God. When? When the Sitra Achra is subjugated to holiness. And the darkness of clippers transformed into the holy light. When we make a dwelling place in God, for God in this world, means we take the darkness of the world and we bring God into it. Make it as if he's in a boat. He feels comfortable in this world. He's here, but he's hidden. He feels comfortable. He comes his house. Not that he's forced to be there, but he feels comfortable in that house. Then you have revealed godliness in the world. And now you have revealed it in this world that's more greater than any world. So that the place of darkness and sitacha prevailing throughout this world, the Ein Sof light of God will shine forth. With a greater strength and intensity. the Yisr and Ha'om and Ha'choshech, and the superior quality of light that emerges from darkness. Meaning, when darkness is transformed into light, the resulting light is superior to the ordinary light, thus shine with a greater intensity than the radiance of the highest world. Asked upon him because in the higher worlds, it shines through garments, as we've mentioned. In the higher worlds, God, even the higher world, God has to hide himself. Question of degree of hiding himself, but God needs to hide himself. So in the higher worlds, God doesn't have an abode. That's why the Gemara says that where does God have an abode? Not in the higher worlds. God has an abode in this world. Because over here, he can reveal himself the way he is. So in the higher world, it shines through garments, concealment, the continents, concealment, the internal aspect of light, which is concealed to screen the air and safe, so that the worlds do not dissolve out of existence. But now the Alter Rebbe says in this world, the Eibishter can reveal himself totally. Then therefore the God gave the Jewish people the Torah. God wanted the Jewish people to make himself a dwelling in this world. How is a human being going to make a dwelling for God in this world if God is not going to give us the capability and the framework and the tools to be able to do that? That's why he gave the Jews the Torah. Where the Torah is called might and strength. It gives us that capability. It gives us the strength to receiving such revelation without being overwhelmed by it. We do a mitzvah, we reveal God in the world, and we're not bottled. We don't become nullified. So today we don't see it, but in Mitzvah we will see it. Mashiach comes, we will see all the essence of God the way it was revealed in the world. As our sages say, that number one, God gives tzaddikim strength to receive the reward in the world to come. Number one, through the Torah mitzvahs that we do in this world, the Eibishter will give us the koyach to be able to receive the light in the world to come. Mashiach comes. That mitzvah, that's why the ultimate reward is not the reward in Gan Eden, is souls without bodies, because that shows again on the lack of the capability of true revelation. We have to take the soul, we have to take it away from the body. Now the soul can receive its great joy and delight. That's not real, because that means that the body couldn't handle it. So the soul had to leave the body and go to Gan Eden and receive its reward. That's not real revelation. Real revelation is when the soul and the body can be together and see revelation. That's real revelation. That's real reward. That's when Mashiach will come and there'll be the resurrection of the dead. The body and the soul will be able to see its revelation in a physical way. And that was the whole purpose. So that's why until Mashiach comes and until the Schias HaMesim, we don't have the true reward of what God intended when he created the world, to have a dira b'tachtonim, to have a dwelling place in this world. And that will only be when Mashiach comes.
And that is why we needed to learn this over today.
Amen. So it's battle with mamish b'el Hashem, that they'll be able to have a revelation of God, and they will not be dissolved or disappear in the light of God. La'asad lavei b'lishum levush, in the world, when the world to come without any garments. So even in Gan Eden, they're still garmented. Over here, Mashiach comes in this world, we'll have a revelation of God without any hidden aspect. You can imagine. as the verse says, and your teacher will no longer hide from you. Meaning, not some interpreted the verse, not as some interpreted as he will no longer hold your reins, but following Rashi, he will no longer conceal himself from you with the edge of a robe of a garment, and your eyes will behold your teacher. Teacher over here, the prophet is talking about God. Like the teacher, the light of God will be revealed to us, and we will not become nullified. You'll see as it says in the verse, ayin be'ayin. Prophet wants to say, what is the meaning of why do we pray for the coming of Mashiach, for the building of the Beis Hamikdash, and for Tchias HaMesim, is ki ayin be'ayin. We want to merit to see eye to eye. It's something that Moshe Rabbeinu asked by God, and God said, no, you cannot have it. But when Mashiach comes, we'll all merit it. We'll all merit to see it eye to eye. It'll sieve as it's brought down. And when Mashiach comes, the sun shall no longer be your light of the day. What's going to be your light of the day? God will be your eternal light. You'll no need to have any more light of the day, because you'll have the light of God that will lighten up your day. Let's end this off. And as it's known, Mashiach, it's known as a Messianic era, and especially the resurrection of the dead. Is indeed the ultimate purpose and the fulfillment of creation of this world. For this purpose, Shiach and Tchias HaMesim, that is the world was originally created for. That's what God wanted. That's why He put Adam and Chava in Gan Eden, because they had that revelation. Then they lost it. Mitch Hashem. The Rebbe ends off over here. The time receiving the reward is essential in the 7th millennium. And the saying in Likutei Torah after the 6,000 years. Brought down in Kabbalah. That's why Mashiach. And all this is going to happen in the end of the 6,000 years, going into the 7,000 years. Which is not like in the Torah, it says it's sabbatical. That's why in Kabbalah, the Mashiach has to come by 6,000. That's Be'itoi. Because we go into the 7,000 years sabbatical to God, and that's why Mashiach will come, as it's brought down in Likutei Torah, but we can bring it earlier. That's Bachishena. We have the capability to rush it up, especially as we are at the end already. We're holding 5,781. We're holding already at the end of the 6,000 years, and we're coming very close, going into the 7,000 years. We have the capability to bring about this revelation at this present time. So as is brought down Likutei Torah of Arizal, where the period until then constitutes fulfillment of the world's purpose. And that ends the Chita, the Tanya of the day. I'm sorry that we did it yesterday. I have a question. Okay, so that's ends the Tanya of the day.
It was beautiful. I liked hearing it again. It was beautiful.
Pleasure. There's a question here that's asked. I have a question about the Pasha. Early in the Pasha, it says, anyone who does not obey the Shabbos shall be put to death. Is that literal? I have a question about the Pasha. Early in the Pasha, it says, obey the, yeah, it's literal. But it has to be, you have to know the laws of Shabbos, and you have to have witnesses and a warning, etc., etc. So, but we don't have the law. We don't have the Sanhedrin today, so therefore, nothing. You cannot put anybody to death at these present times.
Yeah.
You're holding what? We're holding. Today is the 21st day of the month, which is on chapter 104 and 105. Those two chapters, you would have done the chitas of the day. Have a beautiful Shabbos, a wonderful Shabbos, and we'll see each other Sunday morning as we continue the new Parsha. Next week is a double portion. It's a double header.
Whoa.
Yeah, Vayakov Pekude. So it might be the Chumash might take us time. I wish you all a wonderful and beautiful day, because next week is the end of the book of Exodus. Next Shabbos is Chazak Chazak.
Wow, already. Wow.
Have a wonderful and beautiful Shabbos, everybody. God bless you all.
You too, Rabbi. Thank you so much. Good and have a good Shabbos.